I'll look at credit history. And if I look at credit score and credit score is not good, I'll take cosigner, right? So
Yep.
there's some solutions to me for credit. There is no solution to eviction, even if it was in the
Correct.
1800s and you were, I don't care what the reason was. That's somebody who there's plenty of large apartment complexes that can push the gray area of laws and raise the deductible or not deductible deposit and
Hmm.
uh, do other like I won't even take cosigner with eviction. There's no solution to eviction for me. It's just that's a no.
What's going on, everybody? It's Matt the Lumberjack Landlord here with his good buddy Dion. With Mike on vacation, he left us the keys. Not sure that's a really good idea, but we're going to try and prove why it wasn't a good idea over the course of the next 15 or 20 minutes. But what we're going to talk about today is kind of tenants, termites, and toilets. Dion and I both have had some weeks leading up to this with some wonderful binder strategy. And so, he's just looking for the pot of gold and collecting the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. While I am sifting through the excrement to wash off all of the gold because it's currently covered by tenant duty. So, Dion, how's it going, my friend?
Hey, it's going great. I'm glad to be here. I like it when the three amigos are together, but it's kind of nice when Zuber does do something like take a trip, go see his daughter, that's nice. And it also lets us talk about subjects that we do that he doesn't because he has the property, he does it kind of the smart way.
Yep.
I would say as a lazy person, it would make more sense to have a property manager, but there's a long list of reasons why I self-manage.
Yes.
I talked about that in the school, which chronology messed me up because
Yeah,
while we're
that's last
recording
night.
this, it's in future land. But when you're watching this, you were hopefully there.
Yes.
And of the long list of reasons why I like to self-manage is because tenants can be a problem. And when you
Yes.
have a problem, if you want something done right, do it yourself. I want to be the one to resolve the issues, especially when it's my livelihood, my assets, a decade's worth of work of investments at risk. I'm going to handle it very different than a property manager is, even though not all tenants are perfect.
Wait, not all tenants are perfect. What? We are breaking news here, everybody. And yes, we know there's the slumlords. And so for the trolls out there of you who have already caught this video because your phone for just a second thought you might need to know more about how to stop working your 9 to 5 and actually find a way to sooner retirement. We will make sure to do what we can to make sure your phone never suggests such smart things ever again, even though it is a smartphone. But yeah, I think that's one of the challenges. Last week we'd actually done an eviction and then we actually got the eviction done on Friday. And one of the challenges is in our state is that when we do the lockout, if these tenants leave pets behind, we actually have to take care of them. Like, what moron decided to put that rule in? Like, shame on you, you tool bag. But we have to take care of them. The challenging thing was for us, and we've had to encounter this a couple of times. And so what we actually did was, as soon as we saw that there were literally 9 pets, we called the police. We called the police because you have to get it on record as soon as possible. We called the police and said, hey, listen, they're trying to leave 9 pets here. And if they leave them for more than 24 hours, that's abandonment. And so make sure you know your state and local laws because for abandonment, they can actually start to fine you. So what you need to do is you need to make that call right away, right when we were doing the lockout. Within 30 minutes of that process starting, we had calls to the cops because we saw what we were dealing with. If you don't follow me on Instagram, Lumberjack Landlord on Instagram, you see all the pictures of the beautiful mess that they've left behind. The only question is, how many thousands of dollars will that cost? So we made that call right away to the cops. We're like, hey, listen, this is the issue. It was 2 dogs, both of which were extremely aggressive, not only towards people, but also towards each other. So they were locked behind different doors in the units, which is always a great idea. Then they had 2 tarantulas, both venomous. They had a bearded dragon. They had a rabbit. They had a cat. And there was one other thing that they had. But anyway, so that was their list of things. And it was 3 guys, and the tenant that we rented to wasn't even there. So we're just kind of like, this is an interesting scenario. But when we had the cops show up, the cops were like, hey, listen, if you're not here within 24 hours, we're gonna give you a ticket for abandoning that animal. And then you're gonna basically lose control of that because we'll call SPCA, et cetera, et cetera. So what I appreciated about the police and involving them in this process, I don't love for them to be involved in these like kind of domestic things, but hey, you know what? That is what kind of why they're there. They're there to make sure to protect and serve. So they did a great job. I'm sure Dion would have done exactly the same thing had he still been a cop and been a cop where I was and the laws being what they are. Except Dion probably would have done a better job and gotten all of them gone instead of only most of them gone. But the interesting thing is that so Dion, let's start there. I mean,
So
we
with
all
9 pets, I probably would have handled it exactly the same way, get law enforcement involved. And a lot of people are thinking, wow, I would never want to own a rental. Imagine renters being able to just leave their pets, right?
Mhm.
2023, I purchased my most recent house hack. It's a burr, it's a self-funded burr, it's my last burr. And how many people have purchased a house or plan on purchasing a house? Maybe never going to own a rental. So your friends that don't want to own rentals because tenants, toilets, and termites, somebody might leave the pets there. I purchased a duplex, and the douchebag, prior owner, left a cat. And this is a cat that kind of had been hit by a car. Hips didn't work really well. Everything was tighter. Every time he came, he had new scars and scratches everywhere. I started feeding him because he was in the area. It wasn't worth calling animal control on a cat here. It's an outside cat. Comes inside to eat, goes outside for everything else. I've had him in some videos, and he attacks my arm, and I'm
I
my
saw.
video. Right? He's a great cat. So it can happen when you buy a house that somebody can just leave their animal. That's a human thing, not a tenant thing.
Yeah.
And so the conversation comes up often with people, and when they say something like, "Well, you're not retired, you have rentals." Well, of course, it takes me about 2 hours a month to make a couple $100,000 a year that I have to figure out how to spend versus 50 to 60 hours a week to live paycheck to paycheck like most people do. To me, that's retired.
Sure.
They'll say, well, what about that 10 o'clock call you can get about a plumbing issue? Yeah, I've had one.
Exactly.
One.
One.
But now let's trade that for 50 to 60 hours a week. I've had one that came after 8 o'clock at night, and it required, I think at the time, there was 2 or 3 text messages. There might have been a phone call from my handyman before it went to the plumber, and then the plumber was an email because I have a list of people you contact when those things
Mhm.
come up that I've reached out to once.
Right.
So I've had many plumbing issues, but it's usually here's a text or an email of, hey, the shower's draining kind of slow. Maybe you could take a look at it. And then I have somebody go out and, oh, yeah, it needs a hydrojet because of whatever was going on at the time. So there are issues that you solve on an ongoing basis, but is it an emergency? Is the tenant so rough to deal with? I've had tenants where I've had to educate them, right? I acquire a property and there's a really young couple living there and they have
Mhm.
no clue.
Mhm.
The previous landlord basically ignored everything. I showed up for the inspection. I showed up afterwards for the landlord introduction letter delivered by hand. Then I showed
Mhm.
up a couple months later for the binder strategy. So I've had 3 interactions with me where they had lived there for a few years and never met the previous owner. So I became their father, answer to all their problems, everything that squeaked or rattled or whatever. So I had to sit down and have a Dion talk on here's the 3 words that would represent a reason to call me. Things
Mhm.
can be texted and things can be emailed. These are your responsibilities. These are mine. Was it a fun conversation? No. These were people in their 20s. So it wasn't like I'm raising a teenager, teaching them about life, but I was teaching life to someone else's 20-year-old kids. And I haven't had a problem with them since.
Nope.
Right. Yeah. So you have a 10-minute conversation to get my life back down to the 2 hours a month it takes to manage my tenants. So tenants, toilets, and termites can happen. And when you said, how many thousands of dollars is it going to take to do this repair? They're going to handle these pets. And let's say, so if somebody moves out or you evict somebody and know your state and local laws. So if you evict somebody and where I'm at and they leave all their stuff, you put it in storage for 90 days and then it becomes,
Oh,
you can leave it for the storage company if you need to. And it might be 30 days or whatever. I've never had the issue. I know I would go and find out what my obligations are. So I'd hire a moving company. I'd put it in storage, and storage here for a house worth of stuff is probably a couple $100 a month. Maybe it's even cheaper. I don't use storage units. That's why I don't know the price. And people would say, oh, that's such a big expense. That doesn't impact you. Doesn't
right.
impact your cash flow because when we run the numbers on a rental, what do? You have your pie tie. You added the tie at the end, right? Everybody talks about principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, but you have expenses. Those expenses are you're going to need a roof. You're going to need a water heater. Your garage door is going to quit working. You're going to have vacancy and turnover. The vacancy and turnover expense of I got to do something with all this trash to be hauled away. So if it's an eviction, it's different than if they left the stuff. It's when they just move out and abandon the stuff. Uh, you planned for those expenses out of your cash flow when you
Yes.
looked at buying the property. And so as big as these problems are, what would you rather have? The last 3 months where you could drive all of your kids to all of their events. You can wake up and have full of energy because you didn't have to work until late at night. You have all this time freedom, but you might get a text or an email that, hey, there's an issue you need to solve.
Right.
Or go back to your 50-hour work week, all the stress that came with all of employees were relying on you and your kids and family that get
Yeah.
the little bit of time with you that they had when often you were tired.
Yeah, I mean, they get the fraction of the fraction, right? They get the leftovers. So I think that that's really the important thing. And, we look at it now, and I think that, you're right. I mean, for us, it's probably 80% or 85% of the work that I'm always busy doing is because we're always busy rehabbing and rebuilding something. It's not tenant turnover, it's not rental of units, it's not really any of that stuff, because all of that stuff is like a source. We've written the ads in a way that we optimize the return and the number of people that see the ad and the number of qualified people that respond to it. The issue is basically, okay, this one's coming available, 60-day lease. They said they're not going to, or 60 days from now, they're not going to renew. Market now. So it's like, hey, agent, here's all the pictures. Here's the write-up, post it. And she can do that. And then I get a bill for $30 or $40 or $50 or something. And then she sets up an open house. We just had that this weekend. And sure enough, a unit that we got back, we got that unit back on Saturday of last week, and we're rented now at 10% higher rent than what we were before. And these people are absolutely thrilled. And the cost of getting that unit rented is going to be about $250, maybe $300. It's nothing. And it's almost no time, like you were talking about. And that's where I think, if I had to guess, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, if I had to guess, the reason you're not going to do another rehab again is because you saw your amount of time doing real estate stuff multiply 10x, right?
Well, so when you were talking about all of your time going to your rehabs and everything, and that's optimization.
Yep.
You see, you have acquisition and stabilization, but you're optimizing.
Yep.
And that reminds me of this. It's a quote, and I've said it, and I don't know if I've ever heard it anywhere else. So I don't know if it's a Dionism or not. So let me know if you've heard this somewhere else. Real estate investing is not passive. Real estate ownership is very close to passive.
I've not heard that anywhere else.
Okay, so we'll call it a
I
Dion
think that's yours. I think that's
because
yours.
because I've talked very much. I'm a lazy landlord. I want to reach financial freedom to make work option. Everybody's like, oh, I'm lazy. I want to do it too. And I'm like, yeah, but okay, but there was a decade where we box our lazy up into this little cage.
Right.
We get off work and we don't go binge Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
We go and we look at MLS listings. We go and we look at properties. We go and meet contractors and handymen, and we look at what needs fixed, and we interact with tenants. We get that 10-year training wheels on the tenants that we have. Because you've talked about this before. There was a time where I was thinking of, what do I do with this paid off property? It's gone up a lot in value. It's got what you call dead equity. It's got what I call good cash flow because it's paid
Yep.
off, and there's a Section 8 tenant in and out, $3,000 a month. And you pointed out a dialed in tenant is the golden nugget of real estate.
Yeah.
You might have worded it better than that, but
No,
but it's so I still have the asset, right? And yeah, I could lever it up and grow my portfolio if that was the goal. If I was in growth mode, right, I would consider it. But in my end phase mode here of reaching financial freedom and not wanting to grow anymore, I kind of like having that dialed in tenant there. Getting the tenant dialed in was not easy.
no,
It's not passive to become the owner, the landlord with the systems in place. It's once you get there, right? I'm trying to think
Sure.
in
It's like building. I
like,
mean, honestly, it's like building a house. Like you build your house, and then it's like all those people who are like, I want to work for myself. I'm going to start a business. That's your first one, and you spend the next 10 years killing yourself. But then you reach a certain level of cruising altitude where you're just like, I mean, making more money than I ever have in my life. If I've hired properly, I have fewer problems than I've ever had in my life. And then it's, do I then sell the business or do you keep the cash cow? And that's why you find so many old owners, is because they never wanted to give up on the cash flow, because basically they just operated itself because they found a Dion or they found a Matt to run the business for them. And they're like, I only have to look at, financials once a month to make sure that they're not embezzling $10 million,
which does happen.
It does.
Ours wasn't 10 million. It was hire somebody at an entry level position, train them up to a management role, running a campus, and then you find out about multiples of hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Oh,
And tell me it's not your fault. Like me being you.
right.
I
Yeah.
put them
Yeah.
there. I
Yeah.
trained them. I gave the leash that said, Like I should be liable for the theft, I think. I honestly do. And the owners were really cool. They were like, no, we're moving forward. We took the risk. It's our business. Let's get some systems in place that can probably prevent this in the future. Same thing with your tenants.
Yeah.
Tenants will walk all over you. And Jesse Lee pointed out one of the biggest red flags that I've used to not rent to almost every tenant that's ever asked this question. He did a meme, and that's Jesse's thing, right? That's at least that's how I interact with him. He's got
Uh-huh.
best responses to tenant inquiries, I think.
I agree.
So check out the real Jesse Lee if you get a chance. But his most recent one that I saw was, yes, I'm a private landlord, but did you know that private landlords also don't want your something like 300 credit score, 9 service animals, and all this other
Yeah.
tenant stuff too? Because the question is, are you a private landlord? Meaning, are you probably not going to do a thorough background check? Am I going to be able to manipulate you with my sad story as to why you should rent to me? Am I going to be able to walk all over you when it's time for rent to be late or not paid at all?
Mhm.
If somebody asks you if you're a private landlord, don't rent to that person. There is no good reason to ask that question.
No,
I
it's
don't want to
just
deal with
that, yeah.
property manager. It's because I don't want to have to be held to accountable to my actions. I don't want the rules to be held up. I don't want to have all of the reasons why you want a tenant, that person doesn't want.
Do you check credit?
That's a good
What
one.
about
That's a good one
what
too.
about what about past evictions? You check those? Yeah.
And those are actually the only two things that I look at. And
Right.
while I haven't seen a
But when they
justifiable,
but when they ask it though.
oh yeah, you're so with the past eviction one, that's dead in the water. If they
Exactly.
do you check credit score? I say yes, but I also check credit history. So I say I've got a really strict credit score because I don't check employment. Like I'll verify employment to see if I can catch somebody in a lie, but I don't care what they make. Because especially what you've got, and I won't say his name because we're on Zuber's channel today, but that politician who's trying to remove the tax on tips. The majority of bartenders, waiters, cosmetologists, people like that that
Right.
make their money through tips are eliminated when you put an income requirement on your rents.
Mhm.
Really great tenants. I've
Yeah.
got several that have never had issues. So I'll look at credit history. And if I look at credit score and credit score is not good, I'll take cosigner, right? So
Yep.
there's some solutions to me for credit. There is no solution to eviction, even if it was in the
Correct.
1800s and you were, I don't care what the reason was. That's somebody who there's plenty of large apartment complexes that can push the gray area of laws and raise the deductible or not deductible deposit and
Mhm.
uh, do other like I won't even take cosigner with eviction. There's no solution to eviction for me. It's just that's a no.
Totally agree. And I think that it was really interesting, and going through this eviction was the disgusting way that they treated the house, the absolute pigs that they were. And all I did was listen to their excuses and listen to their fussing and their whining. And it was because I felt like she'd kind of, to a certain degree, had the rug pulled out from under her because she got her voucher pulled literally the month that she moved in. And they're like, hey, we're not paying you next month. And I was like, that's interesting. And so I was like, okay, well, so now we have a little bit of a pickle. And so I had a conversation with her. She's like, I'm back to work now. I can do it. And so I listened to her excuses. I listened to her lies. And at the end of the day, hire fast, fire faster. And I should have fired her faster. That was my mistake. And then we made a mistake on the paperwork. We literally forgot 4 lovely words and all others here. Just it was stupid. And so it cost us. But when it's all said and done, what's really interesting is that these people find that they think that they're not a party to these damages. When they're signing legal documents asking for a court appearance, how else would you know about that appearance that you were there illegally? How else would you know about it if you weren't there illegally and fielding the document? You fielded the document and signed it and said, I'm asking for an appearance in court. Guess what you just did, dummy? You just made yourself a party to the debt. Enjoy getting sued. So I think those are the sad things about landlording and listening to people and listening to their sob stories. Dion helped change the way that I manage that stuff because before I would just be like, okay, well, let's make it next week. Okay, well, let's make it next week or 2 weeks from now. And I wouldn't file paper right away. And that was a mistake that I made. That was something where Dion made me better and said, listen, you file the paperwork right away and you can always tear it up. And he's not wrong. The thing that's cost us so much money in our older evictions was not so much the damage that the tenants did, and certainly they did damage, but it was the next, with the process and getting them evicted, it was the next month's rent that I lost, plus the current month's rent that I lost, and then the damages, because I didn't just say, okay, well, just so you know, this is what we're going to do. We're still going to file the paperwork just so you see it. That's the better move. And that's something I learned from you, Dion, for sure.
Yeah, and I love the comments response whenever I say it this way because it sounds facetious when it comes out. When you have a tenant, there's two reasons why I've never had in a decade a late or missing rent payment.
Mhm.
First, I make sure the tenants know that as a favor to them, this is the part that gets me all the hate in the comments. Come at Dion Talk Financial Freedom, not Zuber, even though we're on his channel. I'm saying this, not Zuber. As a favor to the tenant, I'm going to serve eviction papers the day after the grace period. People think that's you're evicting them. That's not a favor. Well, there's a lot of rent relief programs who won't even let you talk to them until you have eviction papers served to you. So you open up channels to possibly have some rent relief if they actually have an issue. If they don't, then they're just trying to play you. And then I have the math of time conversation with the tenants, which most tenants haven't thought of, most landlords haven't thought of. When you say, oh, you need to pay your rent late next week. Okay, let's do it next week. When you were first starting out, you think, okay, I'm helping the tenant because it gets another week to get their rent together. Most tenants, most humans have a month to get their mortgage or rent payment together. That's about 4 weeks. Now, if you let them come in a week late, the math of time says for the next month, you only have 3 weeks. And you
Yes.
just had a problem to get it together in 5 weeks. So we're
Yep.
absolutely setting you up for failure. So I have this Dion talk with the tenants when they say, can I pay it late? Because when they ask that, it's not, I have this life emergency, so I don't have the rent and I won't have it till next week. That's entirely possible, right? Somebody could have they just changed jobs. There was a payroll mistake or whatever. But really what it is, 99.9% of the time, is they have something they want to do and they have this list of bills. If I don't pay my cell phone, they'll shut it off. If I don't pay my internet, I can't stream anything. If I don't pay my car payment, they can actually take it back. Let me see if this private landlord, that's what I was looking for when I rented from them, has a heart on their sleeve that I can walk all over. Don't be that person.
Don't be that person. It gets really expensive, and I can't afford it, and I can afford it, but I can't afford it. So, Dion, any last thoughts on this, my friend?
I learned from my brother when I talked to him about rentals long before I owned one, because that's what he did. He retired with rentals. And I had the question that everyone else does, right? And you look back and you go, oh, why would I ask that? And it's like, we all start from knowing nothing. So this is the questions we should ask. I would say things like, well, what do you do if a tenant trashes your property? He says, don't say what if. Say, when they trash my property, here's what my plan is. Here's the reserves I'm going to use. Here's the contractors I have. Here's the from the last turnover or rehab that I did, the materials that I have stored in my shed that I will use for these repairs. The contractor I would call who loves to come and do cleanup as long as they get to keep whatever they find, right?
Yep.
That list of things. So you're like, okay, when a tenant trashes my place and leaves a bunch of stuff or puts holes in the walls, it doesn't affect me emotionally. It's a part of the plan. It wasn't a what if, it was part of the plan that it happened. And sometimes it never does. Now I had it happen in my first year. So I was glad I had that to start
Yeah.
with. I had the worst experience in the beginning, but haven't had it since.
Same. It was kind of funny because for both of us, our worst tenants. So one would think that a course might actually help you better manage that and avoid that multi-$1,000 almost bankrupting mistake that both Deanna and I made. You guys get to see us 12 and 22 or 23 years in. 12 years, right? 13 years in for you?
11. 2013 was when I got the first duplex. So I've
11. So
been saving before that, though.
yeah, 11 years in for Dion, 23 years in for me. You get to see the now. We want to do everything we can to accelerate so that first 5 years doesn't suck nearly as much as it usually does. Right. And because what's the biggest part of that first 5 years sucking? It's you made a bad tenant decision. You didn't evict them quickly. You didn't hire fast, fire faster. You took excuses from contractors that didn't get stuff done. That's the biggest part of sucking in the first 5 years. And so for both of us, if we can help eliminate that for you, that certainly is what our goal. So I know you can find Dion on Dion Talk Financial Freedom and at 7 p.m. Eastern time with his live streams, 4 p.m. Pacific, for those of you who think that Pacific rules the world. But you can also find me 11:30 a.m. Eastern time on Sundays and excited. And we're actually going to be premiering a new time for the live stream. We haven't decided what that is yet, but we're going to premiere a new time. But hey, Zoop, have a fantastic time on vacation. And thanks for handing us the keys. And hey, hopefully we don't get your channel banned.
And do me a favor, because Matt gave me the new slogan for the Three Amigos. In the comments below, to let me know people made it to the end of the video, say, thank you, Three Amigos, for making our financial journey suck less.